You are not one of the greats. You aren't Shakespeare, you aren't Van Gogh. You won't write the next big novel. Put the pen down and throw your body on the grindstone. You'd have to be delusional to try to make it as an artist. This is what I think I hear. No one says this directly, of course, but in the background radiation of the drudgery of life under capitalism, these sentiments will always whisper to me. Art is not seen as something that is valuable. Most paintings don't turn a profit, and creativity is something most sought after in marketing campaigns. The market is already so oversaturated with every type of media, and corporations keep stitching together more media for the sake of consumption. Slop is ground out of the mill at record pace, made not because someone had an idea they needed to express, but because Slop Corp demanded that the numbers keep going up, profit keep increasing, the line stays green. Creativity is under attack. Have you ever looked at something you've tried to make for so long and just felt so burnt out that you wondered why you even wanted to do this in the first place? It's easy to forget that art exists because someone wants it to. We look up to artists, we see their creations with all of their flaws and beauty, and imagine doing something like that in our own way. Tatsuki Fujimoto is the one I've looked up to the most for a while. Also, I think there is something seriously wrong with him. There weren't any prep schools near me, so I went to an art class with a lot of old people, where I did oil paintings in the corner. There were good artists there, so I decided if I didn't get better than them in 4 years, I would kill them. And since I didn't want to go on the run, if I was a good artist, I just kept drawing. That's not a normal thing to say. Fujimoto often shares very strange stories about himself, like the time he ate his pet goldfish, or how he was happy to be bullied by a girl in college. But he displays the necessary delusion to make it as an artist. Case in point, Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man needs no introduction. It became an inescapable part of nerd culture over the past few years, and one of the biggest anime of the current day. I adore Chainsaw Man, and for some time I had absolutely no issue with calling it my favourite piece of fiction ever. The characters are so vibrant, the story flows with such explosive brilliance, and the art is simply gorgeous. Now, even if you haven't read Chainsaw Man, I'm sure that you know the ending of Part 2 is incredibly unpopular, and unfortunately that has soured the story for me somewhat. But I'll return to the ending. Chainsaw Man is a story about abuse, trauma, exploitation, and the redeeming power of love. These are the kinds of themes that are right at home in any piece of classic literature, anything grounded in the social realism genre. It's also a story about a boy who can grow a chainsaw from his head. Why? The story of the relationship between Denji and Makima isn't one that requires superpowered action. It could work just as well in a realistic setting, with Denji as an exploited teenager and Makima as an agent of the government. Why Chainsaw Man? I think the answer lies in Fujimoto's other works. Goodbye Eri is a story of perception and grief, and, as are all of Fujimoto's works, love. But for most importantly for this video, it's a story about creation. Yuta tries, with the help of Eri, to make a movie that is truly beautiful, that will make people bawl their eyes out. And he gets his wish about 2/3 of the way through the book. His first movie was cringy and amateur and childish, and his classmates didn't understand it. His second was mature and grounded, and touched the hearts of everyone. It made him an appreciated director, and he achieved his goal and was left utterly unsatisfied. Because Eri didn't want him to make a movie that everyone would love. She wanted Yuta to make a movie that she would love, because she loved Yuta's strange direction. When Yuta tries to write a script, Eri constantly rejects them, saying they're too normal, too boring, too similar to what everyone else has already made. I want to watch your movie, because I'm in love. It takes a very specific kind of pain for someone to end a movie about their mother dying with a CGI explosion. That's the kind of specificity Eri wanted to tap into. Yuta couldn't just tell a story about losing his mother, he needed to add a pinch of fantasy. Hence Chainsaw Man. Fujimoto could have written a story about Denji in a perfectly grounded setting, but it simply wouldn't entirely be his story if he didn't add a pinch, or rather a heap, of fantasy. Look at the movies which Fujimoto likes, the ones which inspire him. Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, The Big Lebowski, No Country for Old Men. These are all referenced in the opening, Kickback, all movies which take place in the real world without any fantastical elements. Why didn't Fujimoto emulate the realistic setting of these movies he clearly enjoys so much? Because they already exist, and someone has already made such stories in realistic settings. Only Fujimoto would come up with the idea to have his tortured protagonist constantly turn into a chainsaw, and have the story take itself completely seriously. He shamelessly made the story about something he thought was really cool. I find it telling that the only anime referenced in Kickback is Evangelion, and while yes, every anime references Evangelion, I think it's particularly fitting here. Neon Genesis Evangelion is a deeply personal story to Hideaki Anno. He explores his experiences with depression and espouses his philosophy on life through the lens of teenagers fighting cosmic monstrosities in mech suits made of their own mothers. Anyone can make a mecha anime, but few have the guts to create Evangelion. The show is famous for its incredibly deep lore being entirely unexplained, and its Christian iconography not having much to say about Christianity. Instead of fleshing out the world and having Shinji become an empowered shonen protagonist, Anno spends the second half of the series diving into the damaged psyches of his characters. It's what a lot of people don't like about Evangelion, that all of this conflict and lore is built up constantly in the background, only for the story to never really focus on it. The Angels, Nerve, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and all the other layers of lore are just here to deliver the story of Shinji and his depression. Anno had the confidence to publish a story wherein the final 2 episodes completely ran out of budget. The plot is abandoned, and instead the ending focuses entirely on what Anno actually found interesting, exploring the minds of his characters. Many found it unsatisfying, but to Anno it must have been worth it. He wanted to satisfy his own need to tell a story, not everyone's need to enjoy a story. Now, Fire Punch has a reputation as an insane manga, and when people say that, I think they mainly refer to the dark content matters. Humans are abominably evil to each other in this series, and the main constant in the world is pain. Agni, the protagonist, is constantly on fire and constantly feeling the agony. The first chapter shows cannibalism and incest as a normal part of the world. Sexual assault and bestiality are expected threats. The slave nation of Behelmdorg is genuinely one of the most sickening things I've read about. The way humans are reduced to bodies which produce material, decaying, starving in their own excrement. Fire Punch has an edge to it which would be too dark for most people to want to portray. More so than the edge though, what stands out to me as bizarre in Fire Punch is the complete lack of respect for story structures. Arcs are loosely contained, major characters are constantly killed off, the status quo is ever changing in ways that make me wonder what the hell could possibly come next. There's a 10-year time skip in the second half of the story, which is more or less montaged away. It's an approach to pacing that I've not really seen before or since, but in the end, when you take a step back, it pays off, and I think it's what Fujimoto had always planned for the manga. Fire Punch makes Chainsaw Man seem tame in comparison, not just because the subject matter is more approachable, but because Chainsaw Man is more story-shaped. Fire Punch seems like it could have ended at many times, with the destruction of Behelmdorg or Agni retiring in the cabin, but ultimately it keeps going in new and strange directions. The ending, by the way, is by far the most bizarre part of Fire Punch. It's hard for me to say this is a criticism of Fire Punch, because overall I don't really love or hate it, I just find it interesting, the way it plays with the expectations of how a story should be structured. Now let's take a look back at Look Back. Fujimoto writes directly of the relationship between art and artist here. Fujino is arrogant. She makes art because she loves the attention that it brings. The manga she writes aren't really for her, they're for the people in her class to admire, to compliment. Kyomoto draws to cope with her loneliness and shyness. She doesn't need to draw specifically, but she needs to do something to understand the world and express herself. Fujino and Kyomoto need each other to grow. Fujino takes on the more senior role in their partnership as artists. She directs Kyomoto, says that if she sticks with her, she will blossom. She never loses her arrogance and now basks in the admiration of her fellow artist. Kyomoto needs someone to pull her out of her room and to drag her across a snowstorm to see if their manga has won an award. Whenever the pair walk, it's always Fujino guiding Kyomoto, and more than this, Fujino casts a shadow over Kyomoto. Fujino is the writer and the main artist. She is the one credited for the manga, she's the one who works with the publishers. Kyomoto is always a background artist, a silent partner. She needed a shadow to step out of, or she might have spent all of her life accepting that she couldn't leave her comfort zone. Fujino's arrogance forces Kyomoto to stand up for herself and consider her own needs. But to a greater extent, Fujino needs Kyomoto. Her first step to actually pursuing art is pushed by jealousy of Kyomoto. She can't let anyone else take the spotlight from her. She's bombarded with praise by her classmates, and she seems to think this is all she needs. But when she enters Kyomoto's house, she draws a manga just for herself. Just being in the presence of such a dedicated artist made Fujino want to draw manga for an audience of one, never intended to be shared. When they finally meet, and Kyomoto, an artist whom Fujino considers herself inferior to, tells her that she looks up to her, Fujino finds a completely new expression. When she runs through the rain, she's purely elated. She finds a validation that she hadn't been looking for, and needs some kind of ecstatic, energetic release. Kyomoto is more than an admirer, she's a peer, she's someone who actually sees the value in Fujino's art as someone who knows how hard it is to bring yourself to create rather than to just observe. Fujino confesses that, to begin with, she didn't actually like making manga. It's dull work and it's not glamorous. But when asked why she makes manga, we see all of her memories growing up with Kyomoto. She was pushed first by competition into a real passion for art. Her reason to create became not the attention she sought, nor the finished product, but the act of creation itself, because Kyomoto taught her to love it. I don't think it's coincidence that Fujino and Kyomoto combined make Fujimoto. Fujino is the energy and the arrogance an artist needs to keep pushing themselves forward. She sees other artists' works and doesn't just admire it, but desires it. She wants to be the best, to satisfy her own ego at first. Kyomoto is the passion. She draws because she doesn't know what else to do, how else to interact with the world. Without each other, they can function. In the alternate timeline, we see Fujino still stroking her ego, enjoying her moment as a hero. Kyomoto does attend art school without meeting resistance in the form of Fujino, although she's completely alone. The tragedy of the pair is that they can work without each other, but their relationship brings them so much beauty and enough pain that their lives are forever altered. We only see Fujino's life after they separate, but she seems to genuinely love creating manga after Kyomoto leaves her. The passion remains. In the timeline where they never met, it seems like a little bit of emotion seeped through. And although they were never friends, Kyomoto's love for art still found its way to Fujino. A spark of it has surfaced, apparently, in the weeks before Fujino saved Kyomoto. This is why I think only Fujimoto could have made Look Back. Unlike Chainsaw Man and Fire Punch, the magic realism is light and the premise is straightforward, but the themes are a through line in all of Fujimoto's works. The bittersweet tragedy of life, the appreciation of little moments of love, the notion that it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. Someone else could have written a story about two girls partnering up to draw manga, but Fujimoto needed to write about Fujino and Kyomoto specifically. Fujimoto's works bleed necessity. They're all something it seems he needed to make, albeit there is one outlier. While his stories tend to dwell in tragedy, the tragedy of Chainsaw Man Part 2 is unintentional. As I mentioned, Part 1 was record-breaking. When Part 2 started, it seemed this had been the plan all along. Asa was a fantastic protagonist, more beloved to me than Denji. The Horsemen were the natural follow-up to Makima, and we saw how Denji had begun to build a new life for himself in the wake of the murder of his family. The art was at an all-time high, and exciting new plotlines kept sprouting. How would Denji mature and achieve self-determination, and how will he cope with the responsibility of caring for Nayata? How will Asa deal with her loneliness and self-hatred, and can she escape having her ego taken over by Yoru? Who is the fake Chainsaw Man? What does Yoshida want? What are public safety aiming for? But the story started to slip, and more questions were raised as no answers were delivered. In my opinion, Part 2 began to decline in the church arc. The art suffered from assistants leaving, the pacing became erratic, returning characters were brought back seemingly only for fan service. The unanswered questions only grew, and the answers we did get seemed unsatisfactory. We learned the fake Chainsaw Man's identity, but his appearance and personality are completely conflicting with his first appearances. Yoshida's backstory is never explained, his personality never explored, and we're told that he and Denji actually became friends off-screen. Then he dies. More and more plotlines withered as characters were unceremoniously dumped and forgotten until we reached the final arc. The battle between Yoru and Denji seems like an obligation, just a necessary action scene to tick off a box that says climactic finale. To say the ending was abrupt would be an understatement. Pochita appears to Denji one last time to reset the universe somehow, so that Denji can be written into what is supposed to be a happier timeline. Looking at early Part 2, how high the quality of writing was, it's hard for me to imagine this is the ending Fujimoto always had in mind, or at least that he wanted to deliver it this way. I think Fujimoto reached a point where he didn't want to write Chainsaw Man at all. I mentioned that I think the decline began in the church arc, and this is also where the meta commentary begins. As he tries to leave Chainsaw Man behind, Denji sees Chainsaw Man become increasingly commercialized. People buy and sell Chainsaw Man, and what's worse, they worship a false image of him. The Chainsaw Man church is a lie, using people's adoration for Chainsaw Man to sow fear and violence. Barham calls himself a Chainsaw Man fan, but confesses that he's only interested in seeing action and gore, and Fumiko calls herself a Denji fan, but only latches on to Denji's suffering. None of this is what Denji ever wanted, he only wanted to be himself and follow his own dreams. This is also the arc where Asa ceases to be a protagonist and is barely even a side character. I don't think it's a coincidence that this came after the first season of the anime was released, and Chainsaw Man went from being a popular manga to a worldwide sensation. It's hard for me not to imagine that Fujimoto suffered from the pressure of being known as one of the biggest mangaka in the world. With such massive expectations, I wonder if he changed the story he wanted to make, or was pressured into it. We know that mangaka work under terrible conditions, and Shonen Jump are a soul-sucking company, and it would be no surprise to me at all if Fujimoto lost his passion for Chainsaw Man because of all of this. The unfinished plotlines are erased from existence, we get to see a potentially brighter future for another version of Denji, and the manga is over. Just like that. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. This is what happens when an artist makes something they don't really want to make, and I don't just mean something that they would be interested in making. When there's something you need to make to get it out of your system, whatever you create in the end will, regardless of quality, be something truly yours. Chainsaw Man's ending doesn't feel like something Fujimoto needed the world to see, it feels like a concession. Here's your happy ending, now leave me alone and let me move on from Chainsaw Man. And it fucking sucks, not just because the ending is unsatisfying, but because I know how good Fujimoto can be. He's one of the artists I admire the most in the world, and it seems he burnt out and gave up because he wasn't able to make something that truly expressed himself. Look Back and Goodbye Eri will forever be absolute masterclasses of manga one-shots, and I think all of his other smaller one-shots are beautiful too. Fire Punch remains a strangely gripping read. I look at Chainsaw Man now with some sadness because I know that Part 2 could have been so much better, and the evidence is in Part 1. Reading the first few arcs of Part 2 as they came out was an unparalleled feeling of excitement for me. It was a privilege to watch a master at work. To this day, the Falling Devil arc is one of my favourite arcs in manga, and Asami Taka is still among my favourite protagonists, just because of those early arcs. This series I loved fizzled away, and I felt like I could see the passion leaving in real time. Sometimes I wish that Fujimoto had taken a hiatus after the Falling Devil arc to collect his thoughts and find new assistants, or even to leave the series hanging indefinitely, rather than forcing out what we got. But mostly I'm glad that Part 2 exists. It's bittersweet in a very meta way, the kind of tragedy you would expect Fujimoto to write, not star in. And even though it wasn't what I wanted, I still had fun. Overall, it had an edge you rarely see, and the surprises outnumbered its faults. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe to make the numbers go up, it's what Fujimoto would want. I've realised at the end of making this video that I didn't talk about sisters or just listen to the music, but whatever, the video's made now, I'm not doing more editing. I'm back 3 months after my last video about Pokemon, go check that out if you didn't. The idea for this script has been whirling around in my head for a long time, but I had pretty bad writer's block and just couldn't get my thoughts onto the page, so I followed my own advice and didn't push myself to make something I wouldn't want to have made. What did inspire me to write this was the announcement for Deltarune Chapter 5, because I know that after that comes out, I won't want to talk about anything else for a long while. So, I'll see you then.